Okay, starting with Dante's The Divine Comedy, the first part, Hell. I want to begin with Sayers' introduction, pages 14 and 15, where she quotes from the letter by Dante to Congrande della Scala, bottom of page 14. This is Dante writing to his friend and patron, telling him how his work, the Divine Comedy, is to be understood. So it's pretty important that we understand it as well. Quote, "The meaning of this work is not simple, for we obtained one meaning from the letter of it, and another from that which the letter signifies. And the first is called literal, but the other allegorical or mystical. And to make this matter of treatment clearer, it may be studied in the verse." And then he quotes scripture. Quote, "When Israel came out of Egypt and the house of Jacob from among a strange people, Judah was his sanctuary and Israel his dominion." End quote. Okay. Then Dante goes on. "For if we regard the letter alone, the literal level, what is set before us is the exodus of the children of Israel from Egypt in the days of Moses. Okay. If the allegory, or the mystical as he called it, our redemption wrought by Christ. So the exit of the Jews from Egypt is akin to the redemption of the soul by Christ, okay, or our redemption wrought by Christ. If the moral sense, so now he's introducing a third sense. First one is literal, second one is allegorical, third one is moral. We are shown the conversion of the soul from the grief and wretchedness of sin, life of the Jews in Egypt, to the state of grace, life of the Jews in the promised land. If the anagogical, a fourth level of interpretation, we are shown the departure of the holy soul from the thraldom of this corruption to the liberty of eternal glory. And although these mystical meanings are called by various names, they may all be called in general allegorical. That is, meanings 2, 3, and 4, allegorical, moral, and anagogical, Dante says, they can all be understood by allegorical, since they differ from the literal and historical. Okay? So 4 levels of meaning, 3 of which can all be understood the term allegorical. He goes on. The subject of the whole work, then, taken merely in the literal sense, surface level, the sense of the actual letters on the page, is the state of the soul after death straightforwardly affirmed. For the development of the whole work hinges on and about that. Okay, so that's the literal. So what you mean? Well, Dante descends literally in the story into hell, and we see the state of souls in hell, and then when he rises up to purgatory, we see the state of souls in purgatory, and then when he goes on to the beatific vision in heaven, we see the state of souls in heaven. So we see the state of souls after death. For the development of the whole work hinges on and about that. But if indeed the work, the entire Divine Comedy, is taken allegorically, that is, it's what the word, what the literal level signifies, its subject is man, as by good or ill deserts in the exercise of his free choice, becomes liable to rewarding or punishing justice. So the allegorical meaning is where your soul ends, heaven or hell or purgatory, is dependent upon the exercise of one's free choice here in this life. Because notice when we get to hell, there is no exercise of free will anymore. Free will is done. When you are in hell, you are in hell forever because you've chosen that, essentially forever. Purgatory, you're moving from a state of sin, let's say, early repentance, through repentance to attain heaven. And once you're in heaven, where you are in the nine, in the various levels of heaven is also permanent. Okay? You don't move from one level to another level in heaven, according to Dante's depiction. All right. A couple other general things. The Divine Comedy is divided into three main superstructures: Inferno, hell; Purgatorio, purgatory; Paradiso, paradise. Okay? The hell volume, Inferno, is divided into 34 cantos. Now, the first canto is usually read to be, or like in a prologue, an introduction of sorts. So you have 1 plus 33. And then in Paradiso, in the Purgatorio, in Purgatory, you've got 33. In Paradiso, you've got 33. So you've got 33 plus 33 plus 33 plus 1. Okay? The way some commentators have called it is it's a trinity of trinities plus 1. And the 1 is for the unity, the idea of the unity of the Trinity. One Godhead, 3 persons. Okay, so 3 in 1 kind of a thing. And the number 100 in the Middle Ages was held to be a perfect number. So 100 cantos, total, perfection, Trinity, perfection, unity, perfection. So it all leads to ultimately this perfection, which is the beatific vision at the end of the 33rd canto, if you want to look at it that way, of paradise. Okay? Sayers then says, page 19, okay, she's talking about the poem. The poem is an allegory of the way to God, to that union of our wills with the universal will in which every creature finds its true self and its true being. Okay? She talks about Beatrice and how Beatrice is an image bearer of God, and she quotes a lot from Charles Williams, from a couple of his books, The Figure of Beatrice and The Image of the City, which are both pretty important. Williams was a contemporary of Sayers. He died in 1944 and 1945. So let's skip the rest of the introduction and go on to the beginning. And what I'm going to do, I originally did not plan on doing this, but I decided I probably should, is at the very least, I'm going to say something about the beginning of each canto. Okay, so I'm going to flip through in Canto 1, and there might be passages I talked about in Canto 2, and again, at the very least, I'm going to say something about the beginning of each canto and where Dante finds himself on this journey through hell. Okay, I'm going to leave a lot of the interpretation up to you and to your reading of Dante, informed, I hope, you paid attention to Sayers' notes. And so on page 70 in my edition, hopefully yours looks somewhat like this too. Okay. On page 70, you've got a physical picture right there of what the world is like. So you've got, the world is a ball. Notice it's not flat. The world is a ball, and Jerusalem is at the center of the world. And directly beneath Jerusalem, you have hell opening up. And, at its center point right here, which is where Satan is, then there's this winding way, and that leads to Mount Purgatory. All right. And so it begins Good Friday morning, and we're told that by analysis of the star positions that are talked about in the poem and such. Good Friday morning around 6 a.m. Okay. So, think about it historically, kind of. Good Friday morning. Well, what's Good Friday? Good Friday is the day that commemorates the crucifixion of Christ. 6 a.m., this is before the crucifixion. Might even be before the scourging. Okay? And it begins, page 71. Midway this way of life we're bound upon, I woke to find myself in a dark wood. where the right road was wholly lost and gone. So midway this way of life, we're bound upon. Other translations read something like midway this life's journey. Well, what is midway life's journey? Dante was born in 1265. The poem was written in 1300, supposedly at least, okay? So he would have been 35. Well, the psalmist says that man's life is 70 years. 80 if we're lucky, okay? So Dante begins the journey in his 35th year. Interestingly, Dante didn't live to be 70. He only lived to be 56. He died in 1321. So he says he finds himself in a dark wood. Might be evocative of Psalm 23, you know. He can't say how he got into the wood. He says he was heavy, full of sleep when he first stumbled from the narrow way. That's definitely an allusion that the way to heaven is narrow. Okay, so he finds himself in the wood, and he finds himself, blocked by 3 animals, 3 beasts, a leopard, a lion, and a wolf. Read Sayers' notes. She talks about, what they're symbolic of, and I'll mention them in a minute. Okay. And Virgil appears, page 73. Virgil, the Roman poet, wrote the Aeneid, wrote the Eclogues, wrote the Georgics. Virgil was taken by by many early Christians, not all by any means, but Virgil was taken by many early Christians as kind of a pagan, almost prophet of the coming of Christ. In one of his poems, I think it's one of the Eclogues, I believe it's the 4th Eclogue, he talks about a universal peace, and in that universal peace, a king will come. Well, many in the early church thought that was prophesying the coming of Christ. Okay, when Christ came, there was quote unquote universal peace brought by the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, Augustus, and all that. Okay, so he addresses Dante. He addresses Virgil, tells him, line 85, "Thou art my master, my author, thou. From thee alone I learned the singing strain." In other words, I learned how to write poetry from reading your poetry, from studying your poetry, etc., etc. And he says, "Help me find a way out of here." Virgil, line 91. "Nay, by another path thou must go, if thou wilt ever leave this waste." He said, looking upon me as I wept. So Dante has to essentially go home by another way. Kind of interesting because it's kind of similar, again, kind of echoes, the flight into Egypt of Christ. They go home by another way. They go, from Bethlehem to Egypt and then to Nazareth. But Dante has to go through the wood and through hell and through purgatory in order to get home. Well, where's home? What did Boethius say? So this is one of the reasons we read Boethius, was to better help understand Dante, because Dante is very much influenced by Boethius. Okay? Well, Boethius says home is with God. That's Dante's ultimate home. Okay? Though he wants to get back home to Florence. All right? So Virgil says that he was sent for, page 74. Actually, it's going to say it in the next canto, but he says, you've got to go with, with me, line 118. He says, "Next thou shalt gaze on those who in the fire are happy, for they look to mount on high in God's good time, up to the blissful choir, to which glad place, a worthier spirit than I must lead thy steps." So those who hope to gaze in the fire, he's talking about those who are progressing through purgatory. When they reach the pinnacle of purgatory, Virgil suggests, at that point, somebody else will lead you. I won't be able to, okay? I'll leave thee then and say goodbye, for the emperor of that high imperium wills not that I, once rebel to his crown, into that city of his should lead men home. Well, Virgil is meant to be the representative of human wisdom, of human art also, okay? Not art like painting art, but human culture, okay? Which can only lead so far. He's the embodiment of reason, you can say. Dante is saying reason can only get you so far. Something else has to take you above reason, which, if you remember from Boethius, that's essentially what Boethius said. Boethius said, of those four kinds of intellect, okay, you had sense, and then you had, can't remember it, then you had reason, and then you had intelligence, right? Well, reason is not the same as the divine intelligence that takes everything all at once, that understands something immediately. Reason has to logically follow through and such, okay? Virgil goes on, line 127, page 74. Everywhere is his realm. Okay, notice that. Everywhere belongs to God. So even when they're in the deepest pit of hell, where Satan is frozen in ice, that is part of God's realm. But there his throne, there is his city and exalted seat, Christ blessed, whom there he chooses for his own. And so Dante says, lead on. Okay. Bottom of 75 and top of 76. Sayers gives, her analysis for what the three beasts are. The leopard is the image of self-indulgent sins. It's the first kind of section of hell. The lion is the violent sins. It's the second section. And the she-wolf is malicious sins or fraud, which it involves. And that's the nether hell. Okay? So Canto 2. This is where the journey proper begins. Okay? And we know that because Virgil tells Dante who sent him, and they wander down the veil until they get to the opening of the gate of hell, which we get described at the very beginning of Canto 3. So, Canto 2, Dante invokes the muses. He asks for their aid. Okay. Now, muses, line 7, now high genius do your part, and memory faithful scrivener to the eyes, here show thy virtue noble as thou art. Okay. And I think one of the reasons he appeals to memory is Dante's not writing this as he goes. This is not a travel log, a travel journal, right? Everything is written supposedly after the fact of the journey. And we're going to get a couple of indications of that as we go through. All right? So, page 79, Virgil talks about those who sent for him. Talks about Dante's doubts and stuff, and then he says, line 52, while I was with the spirits who dwell suspense, that is in limbo, a lady summoned me, so blessed, so rare, I begged her to command my diligence. And she speaks to him and says, O courteous Mantuan in soul, because Virgil is from Mantua, right, city in Italy, whose skill and song keeps green on earth a fame that shall not end, while motion rolls the turning spheres along. That is, your fame will go on as long as the world survives. A friend of mine who is not fortune's friend, it's hard to be set upon the shadowy coast. That is, this is Beatrice talking about Dante. Okay? Read what the introduction says about Beatrice. She died young. She and Dante actually did know each other. They had a falling out, kind of, but she died young. Dante kind of looked at her as an image bearer of God, a Theotokos, so to speak, a God bearer. Okay? I'll talk about those terms a little bit later. And she goes on and says, line 70, Beatrice am I, who thy good speed beseech, love that first moved me from the blissful place whither I'd fain return, now moves my speech. So love moved me from the blissful place where I'd like to go back to, that is from heaven. Love sent her. She's not talking about romantic or erotic love. She's talking about love personified, God. So when I stand before my Lord's great face, I'll praise thee many a time to him. I'll praise who? Virgil. Okay. So Virgil says, I'll do whatever you want. Right? And let's see. Pick up with line 91. My nature by God's mercy is made such as your calamities can no way shake, nor these dark fires have any power to touch. Heaven hath a noble lady, who doth take ruth, that means pity, of this man thou goest to ensnare, such that high doom is cancelled for her sake. Okay? She summoned Lucy to her side. The noble lady is Mary, right? She summoned Lucy to her side, and there exhorted her, thy faithful votary needs thee, and I commend him to thy care. So, Mary, who's in the presence of God, calls for Saint Lucy, Santa Lucia, right, who is the patron saint of sight. She calls for Lucy, and she says, your faithful votary needs you. That's Beatrice. So Lucy is sent to Beatrice, and we're told, Lucy, the foe to every cruelty, ran quickly and came and found me in my place, and says, how now, Beatrice, God's to praise. Line 106, dost thou not hear his piteous cries? Alas, don't you hear Dante? Don't you see he's in the throes of death on the river? And so I was sent down here into line 113, into thy golden rhetoric, which honors thee and honors all who hear. Therefore I, Virgil, now speaking in his own terms, sought thee out as was her will, and brought thee safe off from the beast of prey. So, long story short, what ails thee then? What's your problem? Why this dull delay? Why bring so white a liver to the deed? In other words, why are you a coward? Why canst thou find no manner to display when three such blessed ladies deign to plead thy cause at that supremacies of right? Why are you showing such cowardice when Mary, Lucy, and Beatrice are on your side and entreating you? Now, notice, how did this begin? This began with Dante invoking the muses, the pagan muses. But who comes to his aid? Christian muses, if you want. Okay? Christian graces, you can say, come to his aid. So, Dante says, line 133, O blessed she that stooped to take my part. O courteous thou, speaking to Virgil, to obey her true discerning speech, and was promptly to my rescue start. So he says, forward, onward, there's but one will for two. That is, if you lead, I will follow. My will be replaced by your will. Thou master and thou leader and thou Lord, I spoke, he moved, setting out anew. And what's the very next thing? We get the inscription onto the door that leads into hell. And what's the last word in that inscription? Sayers' translation, lay down all hope, you that go in by me. Other translators have, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. Okay? So, Virgil says, page 85, line 16, we've reached the place I told thee to expect, where thou shouldst see the miserable race, those who have lost the good of intellect. What is the good of intellect? What is the purpose of intellect? Keep in mind, when he talks about the good of intellect, he means its highest reason, the summa bonum, so to speak, like we were talking about with Boethius. Well, what's the purpose of the mind and of reason? To know God, according to Boethius, it's to go back to the home of the mind and of reason. Okay? So it's the knowledge of God. Those in hell have lost the good of intellect. Not because they don't know God. They know why they're in hell. They know God is supreme. They know God is good. But they don't get to know God in the sense that Boethius uses the term intellect and intelligence. That is, they don't have the immediate knowledge as those do who will reside with God in heaven. Okay? And we're told, he laid his hand on mine, and with a face so joyous that it comforted my quailing, into the hidden things he led my ways. What hidden things? Hidden things of death, hidden things of hell. Okay? And Dante here sighing and crying. And Virgil explains what it is Dante sees. And what he sees here are what's called the vestibule, okay? The whirling instant, it's just kind of like a whirlwind. And Virgil tells him, the people you see here are those, line 36, whose lives knew neither praise nor infamy. They're mingled with that caitiff angel crew who against God rebelled not, nor to him were faithful. In other words, the angelic beings in this part, not of hell proper. They're on the vestibule, they're on the doorstep of hell. These are the angels who tried to not take a side. Fallen angels, I should say. They didn't side with Satan, they didn't side with God. Okay? They were kicked out of heaven. So Dante asks, but by what torment spurred are they driven out to vent such bitter breath? And he says, Virgil says, this dreary huddle, not only the angelic beings that are here, but the people, the shades Dante sees, has no hope of death, yet its blind life trails on so low and crass that every other fate it envieth. They're not alive, yet they're not really dead either. It's an in-between state. Not limbo per se, because limbo is going to be the next. It's going to be the actual first circle of hell. Okay? He says, no reputation, Virgil, line 49, no reputation in the world it has. Mercy and doom hold it alike in scorn. These are just kind of those who are forgotten. Okay? They never achieved anything. They never sided with anyone. They never took a position. If we're talking about the book of Revelation, these are the lukewarm, okay, which really receive the most condemnation. So, Charon comes to ferry them across, and he says, no, I can't take you. You're alive still. You got to go another way. And Virgil, constrains him, line 94. Charon, why wilt thou roar and chafe in vain? Thus it is willed where power and will are one. Enough, ask thou no more. It is willed where power and will are one. Charon has no power to enforce his own will. Okay? What Virgil is doing with Dante, leading him, Virgil is saying, come straight from God himself. Power and will. We heard those same two words in Boethius, talking about God. Okay? So one of the things we will see in hell is that one no longer has the ability to act out one's will, for the simple reason that one no longer has will or choice. The choice was made before death. And the choice that one made, the ultimate choice that one made before death, that is the state one is in at death. So we get the multiple layers showing that the kind of personality, the kind of sin, let's say, that dominated the individual, that is what they are stuck in for eternity. You know, it's kind of like they made their bed and now they have to live in it for all time. Okay? So they keep going on, and Virgil explains, what it is Dante is seeing, and then he says, line 121, page 88. See, my son, all those that died beneath God's righteous ire, from every country come here, every one. Everybody who dies goes here. Excuse me. Everybody who dies under God's anger, under God's ire, under God's judgment. They press to pass the river, for the fire of heavenly justice stings and spurs them so that all their fear is changed into desire. Okay? So they want to cross the river. They want to go ultimately to where they are to be assigned. Because again, their desire has been frozen in what they desire the most in life, whether it's sodomy, simony, fraud, anger, whatever the particular sin is. And by this passage, good souls never go. Good souls, saved souls, never see what you are about to see. Okay? Therefore, by this passage, good souls never go. Therefore, if Charon chide thee, do thou look what this may mean. 'Tis not so hard to know. Charon is chiding you. What does that mean? You've got a good soul, Dante. You're not meant for this journey. You're not ultimately meant for this journey. So what is one of the purposes overall of the entire Divine Comedy? You don't want to go by this way. Choose wisely in this life so that you don't go by this way. I don't have the other two books with me, but so that you go by purgatory, or better yet, you go by paradise. You just go straight to. Okay? And Dante falls asleep. Or he swoons, he passes out. Why? Well, he's got to cross over Acheron, the river. And there's going to be multiple times, I think it's 2 or 3 in here, in Inferno, that Dante swoons, passes out, so to speak, and is ferried or carried over a passage, okay? And before, if I remember correctly, I've not reread it yet, before he goes from purgatory into paradise, he passes out, okay? So, Canto 4. It's now Good Friday night. Okay, so we began Good Friday morning. (6 a.m.) It's now Good Friday evening, so several hours have gone by. Several of those hours were when Dante was in the wood. Okay, he wakes up to a heavy peal of thunder, and Dante wakes up. He looks around, tries to see what he can, and he's on the the edge of a deep pit, which runs down kind of like this, circularly, like a giant funnel. It's narrower at the bottom, okay? And Virgil says, line 13, down must we go to that dark world and blind. I will go first, come thou behind. And we're going to find out later, Virgil has done this before. Virgil has been down into lower hell, excuse me, before. Why is it a dark world and blind? It's not in the presence, so to speak, of God. It's blind to knowledge, it's blind to reason, it's blind to inspiration, it's blind to wisdom. It lacks spiritual illumination, okay? So Dante looks at Virgil and says, how can I go when you are white with fear? Virgil, line 19, no, you misinterpreted my whiteness. The anguish infinite they suffer yonder paints my countenance with pity, which thou takest for a fright. Virgil, before they've even stepped into hell proper, limbo, Virgil is overcome with pity. Kind of interesting, because why should he have pity? Hell is God's pity for those who are there. I mean, it's one way you could put it. Well, Virgil knows where they are, what they're experiencing is unending, okay? So they go, and they make their way into the first circle. And Dante writes, page 92, line 23, line 25, we heard no loud complaint, no crying there, no sound of grief except the sound of sighing, quivering forever through the air. Okay. So Virgil, without Dante's prompting, says, you don't ask me who these are that you perceive. He says, but I want you to know, the people who are here sin not. Now, he doesn't mean they literally did not sin. Okay, he's going to explain what's meant. Yet their merit lacked its chiefest fulfillment, lacking baptism, which is the gateway to the faith without which thou believest. In other words, because those who were here in limbo did not receive baptism, they were not allowed the option to enter purgatory and or paradise. Or, living before Christendom, their knees paid not aright those tributes that belong to God. And I myself am one of these. So Virgil's telling us, this is where I reside eternally. For such defects alone, no other wrong, we are lost. We died before Christ, okay? Or we lived during the time of Christ and later but never received baptism. For that reason alone, we are lost, okay? Catholic Church, Middle Ages, in fact, the whole church, early Middle Ages, began practicing infant baptism. The Catholic Church would later, the Eastern Church, the Orthodox Church, does not have this doctrine. The Catholic Church would later develop a doctrine that essentially said, a baby that dies unbaptized goes to hell, because that baby is born in sin. And that doctrine comes from essentially St. Augustine and what's called the doctrine of original sin. As I said, the Eastern Church does not have that doctrine. It has a belief in what's called ancestral sin, which is the sin of the first father. And the Eastern Church does not think that that sin is passed on genetically throughout all humanity the way the Western Church and Augustinianism essentially teaches, okay? So, he says, line 41, we are lost, yet only by this grief offended, that without hope we ever live and long. Long doesn't mean and for a long time. It means we ever live in desire. They hope, but their hope will never be fulfilled or redeemed. For all eternity, they're, and it's not a sigh of relief, it's a sigh of longing, of wanting something more. Grief smote my heart, Dante now, to think, as he thus ended, what souls I knew of great and sovereign virtue, who in that limbo dwelt suspended. And he says, tell me, did any man by his self-merit, by his own worth and work, or on another leaning, ever fare forth from hence and come to be among the blessed? Did anyone ever, on the basis of his own merit in life, or by someone else's merit, leave here, whether here being limbo or here being the rest of hell, and go on to a state of blessedness? He took my hidden meaning. Hidden there is allegorized. That is, the surface level is one thing. Dante says there's a deeper level. And Virgil says, when I was newly in this state, that is dead, I saw one come in majesty and awe, and on his head were crowns of victory. This is Christ. Okay? Christ is never named throughout the Inferno. He's never called the Son of God. He's never called Christ. He's never called Jesus. He's never called the second person of the Trinity. He's never called Emmanuel. He's always something either like one come in majesty, the mighty prince, the great one, things like that. Our great first father spirit he did withdraw, Adam, and righteous Abel, Noah who built the ark, Moses who gave, and he goes on and lists a bunch of saints from the Old Testament. Okay? These did he bless, semicolon, and know that ere that day no human soul had ever seen salvation. Okay? So Dante's saying, from the beginning of the world in the Christian story, Genesis, to the moment of Christ's crucifixion and his descent into hell, no human soul achieved salvation. Okay? So, for example, according to Dante's telling, when Christ told the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, that, they both die and Lazarus goes to be in Abraham's bosom and the rich man goes to Sheol and such. According to Dante, that's just a parable. That's just a story to get a point across. Many commentators think, however, both Eastern and Western, think, however, that that's Christ kind of pulling back the veil and showing an image of something that's real, something that actually happened, that there was a rich man and there was a poor diseased man named Lazarus who did sleep by his gate every night, and they did die. And he shows Lazarus in the bosom of Abraham, that is in heaven upon his death, and the rich man in Sheol. Dante, following medieval Catholic doctrine, says, nope, not how it happened. From Adam to the last righteous person who died before the crucifixion, their souls all went to limbo, essentially. And then when Christ died, the event is called the harrowing of hell, and that when Christ died, he descended into Hades, okay, to bring back the souls of the righteous. Now, notice who Dante includes in the righteous. Only the souls of named saints, prophets, kings, etc. from the Old Testament. Writers in the early Christian church don't limit it to only those individuals. Some of the writers suggest people like Plato and Socrates and Aristotle will all be in heaven on the basis of the passage in Romans that talks about people being judged according to the law of God written on their hearts. That is, if they don't know, quote unquote, revealed truth, but they follow what's called general revelation, the revelation that one can get from the world and such, and they act on the basis of that. If they follow their own conscience, their own moral code, and don't violate that, then, according to many writers, the early church and later, those individuals are judged solely according to that law and not the Mosaic Levitical law, which those who know the Mosaic Levitical law get judged by, okay? So Christ's harrowing of hell is when his body is put in the tomb, his soul descends from the body, goes to hell, goes down, according to the Christian tradition, goes down, breaks open the gates of hell, okay, and brings back the souls of the righteous. The way some of the fathers of the Eastern Church actually put it, or describe it, is he goes down, he throws open the gates of hell, and he says, essentially, this is not literal, any of you who now acknowledge me, follow me. So anyone who had died before Christ and was in quote unquote hell, what the Hebrews called Sheol, the place of death, okay, that when Christ comes down there and throws open the gates, he doesn't just throw open the gates, he destroys them, right? And says, come follow me. Those who look at him and recognize him, keep in mind what the verb recognize means, acknowledges him for who he is, like the demons do, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. What do we have to do with the demons saying such? They can go on to heaven. So according to some of the writers of the early church, those who are in hell are those who want to be in hell. And Dante does kind of imply that throughout here, that those who are here because they choose to be. And we're going to see a few people who will essentially, raise their fist at God. In fact, we have the one guy who does this thing, the thumb between the forefinger and the middle finger, which is it's like the middle finger, okay? So, page 93, some shadows come towards them, 4 mighty shadows, and Virgil says, mark well the first of these, and it's Homer, and then comes Horace, and then comes Ovid, and then comes Lucan, etc., etc. And then we get a description, of Aristotle, and they talk for a while. Page 94, Dante sees heroes from classical literature. Lines 121 and following, he sees Electra, Hector, Aeneas, Camilla, Penthesilea, Latinus, Brutus, not Brutus and Cassius, not the Brutus who slew Caesar, but the Brutus who would then go on to found the Isle of Britain, according to some mythology, okay? He sees Aristotle, he sees Socrates and Plato and all these, okay? So, Canto 5. They go on to the second circle, which is, keep in mind, limbo is here. First circle, the vestibule is higher up and outside. So when you go down to the vestibulists say is up here. You go down to the first circle. You go down to the second circle. Each one gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Lost my place. Canto 5. They go down. They see Minos, who's the judge of hell, and however many times Minos wraps his tail around himself, that's the level, the circle you get put in, okay? And so Minos addresses them, and Virgil says, line 22, page 97, hinder not thou his fated way, be sure hindrance is vain, thus it is willed, were will and power in one, enough ask now no more, okay? And we get that phrase again, Thus it is willed, where will and power are one. Okay? See, Minos has no will. When Minos wraps his tail around himself, he's doing that because God has already willed where that person will go. Minos is merely the, the channel through which God is working, so to speak. So he says, don't even try to stop us. Okay? And circle 2 is where the lustful are. And we get descriptions of a variety of people. Okay? Line 31. The blast of hell that never rests from willing harries the spirits along in the sweep of its swath and vexes them forever beating and hurling. Skip a few lines, line 36. Railing and cursing the power of the Lord's wrath. That is, the people who are in this kind of whirlwind that swirls around are always railing against God. Into this torment, line 37, carnal sinners are thrust. So I was told, the sinners who make the reason beyond thrall under the yoke of their lust. That is, the people who subdue their minds to their genitals. The people who make sex the end all and be all of life, or sexual passion, if you want. And so we get a bunch of people mentioned. We get Cleopatra, we get Helen, we get Achilles, okay? And Dante, noticed, is line 72, pierced through with pity. Why? Because these are stories he's read. These are beautiful, moving stories. Who doesn't like a love story? Okay? And he sees two, and he wonders who they are. And we get one of the most famous images in all of the Divine Comedy. Sorry, my throat is sore this morning. And it's the image of the lovers Paolo and Francesca. Okay? And you've got them mentioned in the notes, page 102, Francesca de Rimini, and her lover, Paolo del Verricchio, okay? And we hear, and this is going to be the first of three, what do I want to call these? Duads, dualities, let's say. First of three images where you have two people that are entwined, essentially. Okay? You get this one, you get Ulysses and Diomede later in the 8th circle. Okay? And then in the 9th circle, you get Count Urbino and Cardinal Ruggieri or something like that. And in each of these three images, only one speaks. And they're really the three kind of most famous images in all of the Divine Comedy. And it's because of the story that the speaker tells in each of these, okay? So, page 100, Francesca speaks. Real character, real story, actually happened. Lovers who were killed in the act of love, run through by a husband, with a sword. Line 100. She says, love that so soon takes hold in the gentle breast took this lad with the lovely body, they tore from me. The way of it leaves me still distressed. Love, so she kind of addresses or blames love 3 times. Love, that to no loved heart remits love's score, took me with such great joy of him that see it holds me yet, and never shall leave me more. Love, to a single death brought him and me. Cain's place lies waiting for a murderer now. These words came wafted to us plaintively. Cain's place, that's the outer of the three lowest portions of the ninth circle of hell. Okay? So, love did this, love did this, love did this to me. Well, kind of. So, Dante turns to her and speaks to her and says, line 115, thy dreadful fate, Francesca, makes me weep. It so inspires pity and grief compassionate. Tell me, how and by what did love his power disclose and grant you knowledge of your hidden fires? How did love inform you that you loved Paolo? And she says, the bitterest woe of woes is to remember in our wretchedness old happy times. See, that's their hell. To remember joy. And this thy doctor, Virgil, knows. And so she says, here's how it happened. Now, Paolo was the younger brother of her husband, if you read the note, okay? One day we read for pastime how in thrall Lord Lancelot lay to love who loved the queen. So they were reading an Arthurian romance. We were alone. We thought no harm at all. So she was with her brother-in-law, and they were reading a love story. So they had a book in front of them, and each of them was reading it. And they were all alone. And they thought, no harm here, no danger here. As we read on, our eyes met now and then. So they're looking at the book, and every now and then they look up and look at each other. And to our cheeks the changing color started. Now, what are they reading about? Lancelot's love of Guinevere. What kind of love was that? Illicit and adulterous. Guinevere was married to Arthur. So, they're reading about adulterous love, and they look up and glance at each other, and they blush. Why do they blush? For shame, for guilt, for thinking, she's beautiful, for thinking, he's handsome, for sexual desire of each other. But just one moment overcame us when we read of the smile desired of lips long thwarted. That is the reading in the book. And the implication, I think, is Lancelot sees Guinevere's smile, and the lips are luscious, and they're, attracting him. Such smile by such a lover kissed away, he that may never more from me be parted. So they read of the smile, they read of the kiss, trembling all over, he, Frank Paolo, kisses Francesca. I say the book was Galliot the complying. And there's a note about Galliot, leading to lover's downfall. Ribald, who wrote, we read no more that day. Once he kissed her, the book was dropped, the clothes were ripped off. While the one spirit thus spoke, the others crying wailed on me with a sound so lamentable, I swooned for pity like as I were dying, and as a dead man falling down, I fell. Well, he wakes up in Canto 6. What happened to Paolo and Francesca? The implication, from Dante at least, one kiss, one illicit act of sex, of intercourse, and the brother, her husband, discovers them and runs them both through with his sword. And now they're forever bound in this passionate desire that cannot be fulfilled. Okay? Canto 6, Dante and Virgil go down to the third circle. Okay? They meet Cerberus. And This is the gluttonous, the circle of the gluttonous. Okay. Dante meets somebody from Florence. Page 88, the person says, when you are restored to that sweet world, that is the world of the living, recall my name to living memory. I'm not going to say anything else. Okay? And so Dante asks Virgil, 103, this woe, this pain that they're in right now, will it grow less or still more fiercely burning with the great sentence, the final judgment? Or remain just so? And Virgil's like, come on, have you forgotten your learning? The more perfect, the more keen, whether for pleasure is or for pains discerning. Though true perfection never can be seen in these damned souls, they'll be more near complete. Why will they be more near complete after the final judgment? Because their bodies will be reunited. So think of Paolo and Francesca. Their bodies will be reunited, but they still won't get, consummation. They won't be able to have sex. So his point is, Virgil's point is, when the body is reunited with the soul, the pain that the souls are feeling in hell will be more complete. Why? Because souls are not meant to be disembodied. Souls are meant to be in a body. The flesh is not bad. The flesh is good. But when the flesh is reunited with the soul in hell, the pain will be perfected, if you want. Okay? But bear in mind, it's a pain, according to Dante, chosen by each sinner in hell. Okay? Canto 7. Circle 4, they go down to the next circle, where you have the hoarders and the spendthrifts. I'm not going to say a lot about this. Notice who Dante sees here. He sees a lot of members of the clergy, okay? Popes, cardinals, etc., in whom covetousness, lines 46 and through 48, hath made its masterpiece. Okay? So why are they there? They broke their vows of poverty. They're supposed to take vows of poverty. Okay? And so Virgil says, line 52, 53, living their minds distinguished nothing. Dead, they cannot be distinguished. That is, they did not distinguish between kind of need and want. They could not distinguish between, go back up to line 30. Why chuck away? Why grab so tight? Chuck away the spendthrifts. You just threw money away. Why grab so tight? The hoarders. The skinflints, the tight-fisted. So, line 58, hoarding and squandering filched the bright world's glee away and set them to this tourney's shock. They were never content. Okay? So he says, page 112, Virgil, see now, top of the page, line 61. Again, this is Canto 7. See now, my son, the fine and fleeting mock of all those goods men wrangle for, the boon that is delivered into the hand of luck. And so he talks about fortune the same way Boethius did. What does fortune do? Her wheel always turns. Okay? And so he asked, what do you mean? What is this luck and such? Virgil, behold the grand folly of ignorance, line 70. Make thine ear attendant now on my judgment of her and understand. Attend to my ear on my judgment of her, that is fortune. He whose high wisdoms over all transcendent stretched forth the heavens. That's Boethius's providence. And guiding spirits supplied, that is, spirits that direct each of the spheres of heaven. We talked about that, the ruling intelligences for each sphere and such, so that each part shines resplendent, spreading the light equal on every side. Likewise for earthly splendors he saw fit to ordain a general minister and guide. Fortune. Boethius talked about this. By whom vain wealth, as time grew ripe for it, from race to race, from blood to blood, should pass. Notice, should pass. Wealth is not meant to be what? Simply accumulated and put into a bank. Many poets, many writers from the pre-Christian era forward talk about the reason and the purpose of wealth is to be distributed, that is, to be used to help those without wealth. Okay? Wherefore some nations minish, some amass great power, obedient to her subtle codes, which are hidden. Some nations minish, mean they diminish, and some amass great power. Her permutations, line 88, never know truce nor pause. The wheel of fortune always turns. Necessity lends her speed, so swift through fame, and come and go, and cause succeeds the cause. Well, that also applies to nations. You know, if you read Sayers' introduction, what is one of the things she talked about? You know, the political or historical interpretation of the novel. She talks about it as the image of the city, the image of the empire, or she talks about the three kind of great images: image of the city, image of the empire, and image of the soul, right? And they're all three related. And the image of the soul kind of embodies, incorporates the city and the empire. The city is human community, how we relate to each other. The empire is how cities, nation states, relate to each other and how they relate to God, because as an empire has one emperor, so God is the emperor of the world and such. Well, the soul is essentially a macrocosm, or microcosm, should be of the same. They go on to circle 5, page 113, okay? And we get the first of the wrathful. And Virgil says, line 115, son, here mayst thou view the souls of those who yielded them to wrath. Further, I'd have thee know and hold for true that others lie plunged deep in this vile broth, whose sighs, see there, wherever one may look, come bubbling up to the top. And one comes up and says, sullen were we took no joy of the pleasant air, no joy of the good sun, our hearts smoldered with a sulky smoke, sullen we lie. These are people who said, there is nothing good in this world. These are people who only looked around the world and said, life sucks. They had no joy, okay? They denied beauty and grace in creation while alive. And because they deny beauty and grace in creation while alive, they see only ugliness while dead. Right? Canto 8, we're still in circle 5, the wrathful. Okay. Someone asks how Dante can be going through hell. And Virgil says, line 103, fear no whit, there's none at all can stay our steps, nor make thee forbear the past. The power, God, hath granted it. Okay. And they're getting to the gates of Dis. And Virgil calls on the fallen angels to open the gates. They won't. Okay. So Virgil has to call for help. Canto 9. We now enter the, hell's divided into 9 circles. It's also divided into 3 great kind of circles. The first one is the circle of incontinence, or people who can't control themselves, right? The next is circle of violence, sins of the lion. The first one's the sins of the leopard. These are the sins of the lion. The final main division will be the sins of the she-wolf, okay? So we enter Canto 9 and they are admitted entrance into the city of Dis. What is Dis? Well, disarm, dislike, whatever. It always means negative. It always means opposite. It's always opposition to. Okay? So we see the Furies, page 124, lines 46 and following, Alecto, Megara, and Tisiphone. Okay? They go and cry out for, Medusa and such. And an angel comes, page 125, line 85 and following. And when I saw him, right well did I deem him sent from heaven, and turned me to my guide, who signed me to be still and bow to him, to this angel. What scorn was in his look, he stood beside the gate, touched it with a wand. It flew open, there was no resistance, all stood wide. And the angelic power says, line 91, outcasts of heaven, despicable crew, why dwells this foolish insolence in you? It's foolish because it does not admit of God. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. It's insolence because it goes against God's will. It's also foolish because they have no power to enforce their will. Why kick against the pricks of that great will, whose purpose never can be overborne, and which hath oft increased your sorrows still? Why does it oft increase their sorrow still? Because every attempt made by the fallen angels to go against God just did what? It redounded more and more and more and more upon their head. Whether one takes the biblical story or takes, extra biblical apocryphal stories of the fall of the angelic beings, Milton's Paradise Lost, for an example, what they all essentially show is the deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into sin the fallen angelic beings go, the deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper is the punishment they bring upon themselves. Why? Because they're denying their very nature. Boethius. So what is part of their nature? Partly made in the image of God, free will. They're not made in the image of God like humanity is. There are some differences, but when they go against God's will, there's no redemption offered for them. Okay? So they go into Dis. And what do we see? We see Dis is made of mosques. Okay? Why? For Dante, Islam was a heretical religion, partly based on Judaism, partly based on Christianity, And we see line 124, Dante asks Virgil, "O sir, who are the people lying in these grim coffins?" Because he sees these open graves all around, whose short panes disclose their presence to the ear by their sad sign. And Virgil replies, "The great heresiarchs, those who were hierarchs, but who are heretics, with all those of every sect their followers, and much more the tombs lie laid than thou would suppose." Okay? So, circle 6, the heretics, and we get the burning tombs. Canto 10, Dante and Virgil are in circle 6, the heretics still. We get introduced to Epicurus, lines 13 and following. Hereabouts lie buried close in view Epicurus and his followers, they who hold that when the body dies, the soul dies too. Well, Epicurus is known less for that and known for more for, Epicurean philosophy, essentially, the desire for earthly excellence. It kind of gets skewed in popular consciousness as much as Epicurus is in popular consciousness, that Epicurus was an advocate for, gluttony and such. Not really. He was an advocate for, if you're going to eat meat, eat the best choice of meat. If you're going to read a book, read the best book. If you're going to, everything was perfection of, what you had or got in earth, etc. And then Dante meets the father of his friend, Guido, bottom of page 129. And Dante says, I don't know where he is. And then on 131, he says, tells another spirit, 109. At this my conscience smote me. I again addressed him. Tell that fallen shade, I pray, his son still walks the world of living men. Right? Because they're talking about events past, present, and future. And the shades in hell, the spirits of the dead in hell, can see some of the future. They remember the past. They can't see what is presently going on earth. So when, the father cannot see his son, he's assuming he's died. But Dante says, no, it's not. Bottom of page 131. Virgil says to Dante, let's see here. See thou mind and mark those adverse warnings now to what I say. And here he raised his finger, prithee mark. That is, it's kind of like, pay attention now. When thou shalt stand bathed in the glorious ray of her whose blessed eyes see all things complete, talking about Beatrice, thou learn the meaning of thy life's whole way. That is the whole journey of your existence. Well, what does that mean? Of her whose blessed eyes see all things complete. That's Beatrice in the presence of God, seeing what? All of eternity the way God sees it, experiencing it as now. So when you stand in the presence of God, he's saying, you'll what? You'll learn the meaning of all the little individual facets and aspects of your life. You'll see it all together. You'll get the big picture. Because Dante's kind of wondering, what does all this mean? Why am I going through this? Okay. Canto 11. We get circles 6 and 7. Okay. And we leave circle 6. We go into circle 7. And circle 7 is divided into 3. This is for violence. Okay. And we get allusion, the bottom of page 134, the last 3 stanzas. One stanza refers to circle 7, okay? One refers to circle 8. One refers, last 2 stanzas. Circle 7, let me back up. Lines 22 through 24. Of all malicious wrong, the earns heaven's hate. The end is injury. All such ends are won either by force or fraud. Both perpetrate evil to others. But since man alone is capable of fraud, God hates that worst. The fraudulent lie lowest, then and groan. That's in circles 8 and 9. And groan deepest. Of these 3 circles, okay, the 3 remaining, 7, 8, and 9, all the first, circle 7, holds violent men. But as threefold may be their victims, in 3 rings they are dispersed. The violent men are dispersed in 3 rings within circle 7. Okay? So the 3 rings are determined by their violence against God, self, and neighbor, top of page 135. So the first level in circle 7 is for lines 37 and following. Murderers, men who are violent of their hands, robbers and plunderers, they're all in the first ring. In the second ring of circle 7, okay, you've got those who do violence against themselves, the suicides, and their own lives or their own goods destroy. So they in the second ring in vain repent. Okay. The third, the lowest ring of circle 7, those men who do violence to God, who curse and in their hearts deny him, or defame his bounty and his natural universe. Okay? So they curse against God, they curse against nature, they curse against art. Okay? So the third ring, we're told, sets on its seal on the double shame of Sodom and Cahors, that is, they're sodomites, homosexuals, lesbians, and on the speech of the froward heart, dishonoring God's great name. Okay? Bottom of page 135, fraud may be a breach of trust against the confiding or deceive such as repose no confidence. So fraud kind of has two different levels. You can defraud somebody who has put their faith and trust in you, or you can just defraud anybody by lying to them. That's a form of fraud. Okay? So we're told the second circle, this is overall circle number 8, all right, which is the circle with all the malbulges, or malboges, as Sayers translates it, has hypocrites, flatterers, dealers in sorcery, panders and cheats, and all such filthy stuff with theft, simony, and barratry. Okay? The other kind, those who deceive people who place their trust in you, that's circle 9. Okay? So in the smallest circle, core of the universe and throne of Dis, the traitors lie. Okay? So what Dante has just done through Virgil has given us an overview of the next section. So we have a roadmap, as it were, of where we're headed. Okay? So Dante wants to know how hell is divided up. He says, I don't understand the order. And page 136, Virgil says, have you forgotten your ethics? Meaning Aristotle's Nicomachean ethics, because it's in there that Aristotle describes, sins, vices, whatever, as being of 3 kinds. Incontinence, line 82. Incontinence, vice, and brute bestiality. Okay. Let's see. So they start to talk about usury and how usury is a crime against nature and art. What is usury? Usury is making money off of money, like lending money for interest. What good does that produce? Good, tangible object. It doesn't, right? Okay, so the church in the Middle Ages considered usury to be a crime because it's trying to get nothing for nothing. It's trying to make something out of nothing. Okay, the old idea was, you turn something out of the ground and you produce something. You get clay and you produce a pot. You plant a seed and you produce a harvest, kind of a thing. You cut down a tree, you make a chair. So you're taking something and transforming it and making it into another object. With money, you don't do that. With usury, you don't do that. Okay. And then on page 138, you get a nice, chart, map, however you want to call it, showing you the various levels and then going down to the final level with all the notes. Canto 12, they go down to the 7th circle, and this is the circle of the violent, okay? But it's the first of 3 within the overall 7th circle, right? And so Dante wants to know how there is this, these fallen rocks, okay? And Virgil explains, I think that was when, line 37, 'twas thus, if I judge rightly, on the day when that great prince to the first circle above entered, and seized from this the mighty prey. Shortly ere he came, the deep foul gulf did move on all sides down to the center. Shortly ere he came, before he died, what? Or when Christ died, I should say, there was a great earthquake. That's the earthquake being referred to. The tombs were opened in Jerusalem. The veil was rent from top to bottom in the temple, etc., etc. Okay? So they keep going. I'm not going to say anything else about that canto. On to canto 13. We're now in the second ring of the violent. These are the violent against self. These are the suicides and those who, dispose of all their wealth. And I don't mean dispose like St. Anthony the Great, founder of Western monasticism, or founder of monasticism, where he gives all of his belongings away to the poor. Not, this is the kind of, profligate spending where you just don't care anymore, you just burn it all down kind of a mentality, okay? So they go into the forest, so to speak, of trees that are scrawny and horrible looking, and Dante wants to know what's going on, and Virgil tells him to break a little twig. And he does, and this voice cries out and says, line 33, why tear my limbs away? Why dost thou rend my bones, breeze, etc., etc.? And Virgil apologizes, says, I had to tell him to do that because he wanted to know, and there was no other way for you to speak. Okay? So Virgil says, line 52, tell him who thou wast, that he may try for some amends to right thee with mankind. And notice, we're going to hear several times, Dante will say, or Virgil will say, tell Dante your story, or Dante will say, tell me your story, and if I may, I will try to do something for your reputation up in the world above. I will try to increase your fame, something like that. Okay, so the spirit goes on and talks about, how he killed himself and how, when they kill themselves, they end up in the trees. Line 94, when the wild soul leaps from the body, which its own mad violence forces it to quit, Minos dispatches it down to the seventh ditch. It falls in the wood, no place is picked for it, but as chance carries it, there it falls to be. Where it falls, it sprouts like a corn of wheat, grows to a sapling, thence to a wild tree, and then the harpies come and feed on it to increase its pain. Okay? And he says, and when the last judgment comes, line 103, we shall take our flight when all souls take their flight to seek our spoils, but not to be rearrayed, for the spoils of the spoiler cannot be his by right. He's saying, we will take our spoils, our bodies, and we will bring them back here, and here the bodies will hang on the thorns of the trees that contain their souls. Why? Because they intentionally sought the destruction of body and soul alive. Forevermore, body and soul will be separated, which will make their pain even greater. Canto 14, we now go to the third level of circle 7, the violent against God. Okay? And Dante describes this circle partially, beginning in line 5, and saw appear. So they go around, they go to the third ring, and saw appear a terrible art which justice here conceives. Notice, justice, we're told, also produces something. And that's what's meant by art, artifice. Something made, something constructed, okay? And then Dante addresses God's kind of eternal purpose. Line 16, fearful indeed art thou, vengeance of God. He that now reads what mine own eyes with awe plainly beheld, well may he dread thy rod. That is, if you're reading this book, beware God's vengeance, beware God's justice. And what does he see? Great herds of naked spirits. Some on the ground lay supine in one spot. Those are the spirits who went against God directly. Some upon their hunkers squatted low. Those are those who go against art, against the desire to create or made stuff. And others roam ceaselessly and rest not. Those are those who are violent against nature, against the natural order of things. Okay? And Dante meets one, page 157, and he speaks to him. And this is Capaneus, if I remember right. Yeah. Line 51. That which in life I was, in death I am, though Jove tire out his armorer, who supplied his wrathful hand with the sharp thunderstone that in my last day smote me through the side. Capaneus, if you read the note, was one of the 7 against Thebes, and he had been told, if you go against Thebes, there's a prophecy, you're going to die, and he's like, the hell with that, I don't worry about prophecies. Well, here, notice, he is still thundering against Jove. He calls God Jove because he's in ancient Greek, and what does Virgil do? Virgil says, 63, O Capaneus, since thy proud insolence will not be quenched, thy pain shall be the more. No torment save thine own hot rage could be a fitting cautery to thy rabid sword. And then he explains to Dante who he is, and Virgil says he held and seemingly still holds God light. Interestingly, Virgil doesn't call God Jupiter. He calls him God. Why? Because he knows the difference. Okay. You get an image from Daniel. Let's see, we can skip the rest of that. So, Canto 15, we're still in Circle 7. We're in the 3rd ring. We have the violent against nature, those in the burning sand. These are the sodomites, homosexuals. If we were to go around more, we would meet lesbians and such. Okay? And one thing some people, assume about Dante is that he only puts his enemies in hell. And Sears makes a note of this. It's not true. He's got friends in hell. This is, one of the greatest examples. This is Dante's teacher, Brunetto Latini, beginning with lines 31 and following. He's not in hell because he taught Dante wrongly. He's not in hell because he, mistaught or anything like that. He's in hell because he's gay. Homosexual, goes against nature, as Dante puts it. Okay? Line 46. So Brunetto Latini asks Dante, what chance or fate has led thy footsteps here before thy final day? And Dante says, up in the sunlit life, I lost my way in a dark vale. Before my years had come to their full number, I lost my way. I got off the straight and narrow. Only yesterday at morn, this is now Holy Saturday in the morning, only yesterday, it's the Saturday before Easter, only yesterday at morn, I turned my back upon its gloom, that is upon the dark veil. This other came, pointing to Virgil, found me returning there, stopped me, and by this path now leads me home. Well, where does this path ultimately lead? To the center of hell, back up, through the southern hemisphere, through purgatory, Virgil stops, through heaven, the beatific vision. Is that his home? That's his ultimate home. But Dante goes on and quote unquote lives after this. Okay. So Dante talks about what a powerful image Brunetto Latini was for him, how he still fondly thinks of him. And Dante says, line 88, your words about my future I'll write fair with other texts to show to a wise lady who will gloss them if I ever get to her. This much I'd have you know. I can stand steady, so conscience chide me not, facing unafraid whatever fortune brings, for I am ready. In other words, Dante's kind of learned the lesson Boethius had to learn. whatever may come, you have to face it. You have to face it courageously, okay? Time and again, I've heard these forecasts made because Brunetto Latini has prophesied about Dante's future banishment from Florence, all right? And when my master's ear caught that word, he turned right face and said, well heeded is well heard. Well heeded. In other words, it's not enough to just listen to it. You have to do what you said you've heard. So it's one thing to say, you know, he will face it unafraid. It's another thing to actually do it. That's the heeding part, right? So we find out, you know, line 106, a lot of the sodomites that are there were clerks and men of worth and letters and scholarship. Dante seems to be saying something about homosexuality and scholarship goes together. Not saying that he equates them, just Canto 16, still in the sand, the violence against nature, the sodomites, etc. We meet three, you know, famous people from Florence. I'm going to skip over all of that. Canto 17, we're still in Ring 3, the violent against art and such. We meet usurers, okay? Other images of fraud. We find someone who, you know, fraudulently made counterfeit coins. We find people who were counterfeit to other people. They pretended to be who they were not. They impersonated others. Okay. Canto 18, we get to Circle 8. Okay. And Circle 8 is divided into the 10 what are called boges or purses or sacks, if you would. You know, so it's shaped like this. You got, you know, it comes like this, and then there's a pouch like that. And then there's a little bridge, and you go down to the next pouch. And then there's a little bridge, and you go down to the next. And each time you're going deeper and deeper. Okay. So 181, we get the description of the malboges, and at the center of which is a well, which is where Cocytus lies. Okay. And let's see here. We meet first in Boge 1, the panderers, or panders. And bottom of 182, we meet a man who sold his sister for sex. He pimped his sister out, okay? We see Jason, who was false to not only Hypsipyle, but also to Medea. In other words, he was a seducer, okay? So that's why he's there. Boge 2, on page 184, we get flatterers, steeped in filth. Look at the description, line 97. No, take that back, 106. The banks were crusted with foul scum, thrown off by the fume and caking there till nose and eye were vanquished with sight and reek of the fulsome stuff, noisome stuff. Skip the next paragraph. And I, thence peering down, saw people in the lake's foul bottom, plunged in dung, the which appeared like human orderer running from a jakes. A jakes is a latrine, a toilet. So this looks like it's just got piles of crap running from it. What's the crap? It's the flattery people spoke. Lies. You know, when somebody tells somebody who's an idiot and a moron, you know, you're the most brilliant person in the world. Well, that's, pardon my language, it's verbal shit, okay? So 125, one of the speakers says, the flatteries I spewed out of pace with tireless tongue have sunk me to this state. So he's now buried in this crap. Dante asks, before we leave the place, lean out a little further, that with full and perfect clearness thou may see the face, Virgil says this, of that uncleanly and disheveled troll, and he sees the harlot Thais from classical literature. She's not there because she's a harlot, Sayers points out. Okay? She's there because she sold false words, prostitution of words, as Sayers puts it. Canto 19. Okay? We're now in Boge 3 or Purse 3 or Sack 3, however you want to call it. And we have the simoniacs. Simony is the practice of selling a church office or church benefice for money. It comes from the book of Acts, where Simon Magus came to Peter when he saw what the apostles could do because they had the power of the Holy Spirit. And he said, "How can I buy this?" And Peter said, "You're going to die." And he falls down dead. His wife comes in. He says, "Did you?" She says exactly what Simon Magus says, and she falls down dead too. Okay? Who's here? A lot of popes and church people. Okay? And we get introduced, line 52, to the speaker calling out, already standing there, art standing there already, Boniface? Well, this is Nicholas, who was the pope before Boniface. And he says, and there's other popes down before me. They're head first in the ground. So this is Nicholas kind of calling up. And he thinks the person standing above him is Boniface. And Boniface is going to push him down. And somebody else will replace Boniface. Right? Why does Dante put all these churchmen, popes, cardinals, archbishops, priests, prelates in hell? Because this is Dante saying, you guys aren't following what the teachings of the church say, okay? So line 68 and 69 and following is where Nicholas explains who he is. He talks about, what's going to happen. And for the first time, and we're, halfway? Yeah, we're over halfway through Inferno. For the first time, Dante just lets rip. I mean, he really heaps insult and condemnation on a sufferer, beginning with lines 88 and following. 90 and following. Dante says, "Nay, tell me now how great a treasure of gold our Lord required of Peter ere that he committed the great keys into his hand. How much did the Lord sell the keys to the kingdom of heaven and hell to Peter? Certainly he nothing asked, save, follow me. Nor Peter nor the others made demand of silver or gold when, in the lost soul's room, they chose Matthias to complete their band." In other words, they didn't tell Matthias, St. Matthew, pitch in, "Then bide thou there." Bide means spend your time. "Thou hast deserved thy doom. Do thou keep well those riches foully gained, that against Charles, emperor, made thee so venturesome. And were it not that I am still constrained by veneration for the most high keys thou bearest in glad life." In other words, Dante is saying, I venerate the office and the power of the see of Peter, the papacy, even though individual members who hold that see, that seat, okay, might not be worthy of it. He said, "And if I didn't venerate those keys, I had not refrained my tongue from yet more grievous words than these. Wherever ascends the world, trampling onward, exalting the workers of iniquities." And then he goes and just says, the book of Revelation is going to apply to you. You deify, line 112, silver and gold. How are you sundered in any fashion from the idolater, save that he serves one God and you serve 100? And then he blames Constantine. Why? Because Constantine was the one who united church and state. And you've got a note talking about the donation of Constantine, which was a forgery from the 400s that said, Constantine essentially gave power to the church and therefore the emperor could rule the church. It's a forgery, it's false, okay? Go on to Canto 20. Now in the fourth badge, whatever you want to call it, of circle 8, these are the sorcerers. Okay? And when Dante meets them, their heads are turned around. So their heads face backwards. Why? Because sorcerers, ultimately, what they're always trying to do is they're trying to divine the future. They're trying to see too far ahead. Right? So God in his infinite wisdom has made it so that they always look backwards. And so we meet Tiresias, for example. We've seen Tiresias in the Greek plays. We've seen him in the Odyssey. Well, he was a fortune teller. He was a prophesier. Right? And so we meet him. We meet others. Canto 21, Gouge 5. We're now into the boiling pitch. These are what are called the barators, who made money by trafficking, buying and selling public offices. This today is essentially entirely legal. Well, it's legal in one aspect. How do people, when a new administration takes over, we've got the election tomorrow, Trump may be reelected, Biden may be elected. Let's say Biden gets elected. What's one of the things Biden's going to do? He's going to appoint new ambassadors to the nations of the world. On what basis will he appoint those ambassadors? Well, if he does it like presidents have done for the last 100 years, they will be people who raise money for him, who raise money for his campaign. They will be people who helped him in his campaign. And those people that he's closest to or raise the largest monies, they get the best ambassadorships. England, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, cushy jobs, nice jobs when you can get them. That's exactly what this is talking about. Only in that sense, it's legal. What this is talking about is an illegal sense, like if a mayor were to offer somebody money, and I don't mean like a salary, would be like if somebody offered a mayor money to be hired as, I don't know, director of public works, something like that. Director of Parks and Recreation. Here, Mayor, I'll give you 50 grand. Let me be Director of Parks and Recreation. And the mayor appoints the person. That's the buying and selling of offices. Okay? These people are plunged in boiling pitch, and when they try to come out of the pitch, the demons flay them. Okay? So we get a description, and we see the demons flay each other, showing us through the image that there's no love lost between the demons. They're not unified. They don't work for a common goal. They're as much at each other as they are at the sinners. Okay. Canto 22, we're still with the barators, and we meet specific ones. Okay. And we see the demons go after each other. Canto 23, still circle 8. We're still in the Malboges, and we go on to Malboge 6, where they find the hypocrites, okay, walking in gilded cloaks lined with lead. Top of page 215, line 64. Outwardly, they were gilded, dazzling bright. What does gilded literally mean? It means covered in gold. So they're dazzling bright because they're shiny gold. But within, the gilding is covering lead. Well, lead is the least profitable of metals. Gold, taken here to be the highest metal. Okay? Why? Well, these are the hypocrites. What do hypocrites do? They say one thing, It's the gilding. They do another. That's the lead. Okay? So they wear this mantle for eternity. And who do we see? I mean, who's the most famous one? Page 216, you see Caiaphas. Why? Because Caiaphas prophesied that it were expedient for one to suffer rather than all the Jews to suffer. Right? Line 115. He thou dost gaze on, pierced by the triple stake, counseled the Pharisees 'twas expedient one man should suffer for the people's sake. Naked, transverse, barring the road's extent, he lies. That is, he's crucified on the road. And all who pass with all their load must tread him down. The other hypocrites with their leaden coats must walk upon Caiaphas. Such is his punishment. In this same ditch lie stretched in this same mode his father-in-law, Ananias, and all the Sanhedrin whose counsel sowed for the Jews the seed of blood. Then I saw Virgil stand and marvel at him thus racked forever on the shameful cross in the everlasting exile. That is, Virgil's kind of just looking dumbfounded in amazement. Notice no words from Virgil, no condemnation, right? And you got an interesting, page 217, you got Sayers' commentary. 3 levels, 4 levels of meaning. Literal, the punishment of Caiaphas after death, that's what it is. Allegorical, condition of the Jews in this world, being identified with the image Christ they rejected, etc. The moral meaning, the condition in this life, that is on earth, of the man who sacrifices his inner truth to expediency, his true vocation to money making, his true love to a political alliance. And what she's saying is Caiaphas sacrificed his true purpose for this, it is expedient that, right? And then the anagogical, the state both here in life and hereafter death of the soul which rejects God. And therefore, what does it do? If it rejects God, it only knows God as wrath and terror, okay? Notice, by the way, or note, bottom of page 217, while at the same time it suffers the agony of eternal separation from God, who is its only true good. And we're right back in Boethius. Canto 24. We go on to passage, we go from passage, we pass from boats 6 to 7, okay? Where they have to climb a wall. And we're told Dante is tired. It's kind of like he wants to stop and take a breather. Bottom of page 221. And Virgil says, put off this sloth for shame. Sitting on feather pillows, lying reclined beneath the blanket is no way to fame. In other words, you want fame? You have to work for it. Fame without which man's life wastes out of mind. Now, bear in mind who's saying that. That's Virgil the pagan. For him, fame here above on earth, your name lasting so people remember you, that's what's all important. Leaving on earth no more memorial than foam and water or smoke upon the wind. Okay? So, that's all that will be left of you if you don't have fame. Smoke on the wind, foam in the water. Rise up, control thy panting breath, call the soul to aid that wins in every fight, save the dull flesh should drag it to a fall. He's saying kind of like when Athena says to Orestes, courage. Right, excuse me, Apollo says to Orestes, courage, be firm. More stairs remain to climb, a longer flight. See, Dante's tired. It's now Holy Saturday morning. This has been going on since Holy Thursday morning, Friday morning. Holy Friday morning. No, it began Holy Thursday evening. Okay. So he's been walking for a long time. He's tired. Virgil says, you've got more stairs to climb. He's not talking about in hell. He's saying, you know, buddy, you're in it for the long haul. We get through hell, you still have to go up through purgatory. Okay? And that's a mountain. And it's steep. And then you got to go into heaven. Merely to quit that crew suffices not. Does take my, you get my drift? Act and profit by it. See, everybody else that they've met, or everybody they've met, they haven't profited by their actions. Not monetary profit, soul profit. They haven't, through their actions, laid up their treasure in heaven, as Christ says. So up I scrambled, making myself out less breathless than I really felt. Wherefore, lead on, said I, I'm resolute and stout. Okay? So they go on. They meet thieves. Okay? Canto 25, they're still in boat 7. Thieves and serpents, that is, they transform, and you get these 6 guys, and they transform into each other. The head turns, the arms turn into the body of a snake, and then that body turns into the body of somebody else, and it transforms back into a snake, etc., etc. Okay? Why? Well, what do thieves do? They take things that aren't their own. They imply that they are their own. They try to take them into themselves, so to speak. Okay? Canto 26, they make the way to the next Boge, number 8. And we're told on page 233, Dante reproaches Florence. Okay? That's what the little blurb at the top says. And this is where we meet the second of those 3 dyads, kind of, that I referred to, where you have 2 people kind of twined together and only one of them speaks. Dante says, line 19, I sorrowed then, that is, when I was there in hell, I sorrow now again. This is another one of those instances where he's indicating to us, I'm looking back upon the journey and writing about it. I sorrow now again, pondering the things I saw, thinking about, making sense of, and curb my hot spirit with an unwontedly strong rein, for fear it run where virtue guide it not. My hot spirit, my passionate spirit. Notice, what's he doing? He's practicing control. Okay? This is continence, not incontinence. Lest, if kind star or greater grace have blessed me with good gifts, I mar my own fair lot. So he's practicing self-control. And notice that practice of self-control is working in tandem, in synergy with a kind star or greater grace. Okay? So he sees the flames of the spirits, the counselors of fraud, and he says, who's that tall one? Who's that tall spirit that walks around and it's cleft at the top? So it's a single pillar of light with like 2 flames coming off. Page 234. And Virgil says, well, let me back up. Line 52. Who walks in that tall fire cleft at the crest, as though it crowned the pyre, where those great foes, his brother and Eteocles, were placed. In Statius's Thebaid, which is a retelling of a lot of ancient Greek stories, you get the story of Polynices and Eteocles, the 2 sons, of Sophocles. And we're told there that Polynices and Eteocles were burned on the same funeral pyre, but the flames of their bodies wouldn't mix. They so hated each other. So, Virgil says, line 55, tormented there, Ulysses goes with Diomede. Now, Ulysses is Odysseus, okay? Ulysses is the name Virgil gives to um, Odysseus in Virgil's epic, the Aeneid, which is about the founding of Rome. For as they ran one course, sharing their wrath, they share the avenging throes. In fire, they mourn the trickery of the horse, the Trojan horse. Diomede was instrumental in the trickery. That opened up the gates through which the high seat of the Romans issued forth perforce. There mourn the cheat by which betrayed to die, the Adamia, Wales, Achilles, still, etc., etc. So why does he put Odysseus here? Well, Dante is of what race? He's Roman. Who are the Romans descended from? The Trojans. Odysseus deceived the Trojans, put them in hell. Okay? So Virgil has to conjure Ulysses or Diomede to speak. Look at the language that's used, line 73, page 235. He says, let me speak to them, because you being Greek, they being Greek, they may not listen to you. So Dante writes, in this form conjuring it, that is the spirit, I heard him, Virgil, speak. You that within one flame go two as one, by whatsoever I merited once of you, by whatsoever I merited under the sun. And Sears talks about this is the language of conjuration, where you get two kind of obsecrations, two kind of demands. By this power I speak to you. So whatsoever I merited once of you, talking about you in the Aeneid. Whatsoever I merited under the sun, when I sang the high songs, the Aeneid, whether little or great my due, stand, that is kind of stop where you are, and let one of you say what distant born, when he voyaged to loss and death, he voyaged unto. Okay? And we're told, and like a speaking tongue vibrant to frame language, the tip of it flickering to and fro, in other words, it's now vibrating, he threw out a voice and answered, when I came from Circe at last, so we know this is Odysseus, who would not let me go, skipping a bit, no tenderness for my son, nor piety to my own father, nor the wedded love that should have comforted Penelope, could conquer in me the restless itch to rove and rummage through the world, exploring it, all human worth and wickedness to prove. And for all we know, Dante invents totally this stuff about Ulysses / Odysseus's last voyage. There's nothing in classical lit that talks about it. Okay? Tennyson will base his poem titled Ulysses on this episode in Dante. Highly recommended. So he goes on. I don't think I'll, I'll go ahead and read it all. Page 236. So on the deep and open sea I set forth with a single ship and that small band of comrades that never left me yet, for as far as Morocco. So he sails westward through the Mediterranean. He goes north of Morocco, which is on the northern coast of Africa, as far as Spain. Okay, he goes through what's called the Straits of Hercules, Rock of Gibraltar on one side, Morocco on the next. It's called the Straits of Morocco, if I remember correctly. Out into the open Atlantic. And from there, he turns leftward and he sails south, right? And so he says, line 112, brothers, said I, that have come valiantly through 100,000 jeopardies under God to reach the west, you will not now deny to this last little vigil left to run a feeling life, the new experience of the uninhabited world behind the sun. In other words, we've got a little bit of life left in us. Let's go out with a bang. Think of your breed, that is your breeding. Think of your lineage. For brutish ignorance, your metal was not made. To die like a sick old man. You were made men to follow after. It means to seek after knowledge and excellence. He says, We were designed to push the envelope, to seek, Star Trek, to seek out strange new worlds, etc. My little speech made everyone so keen to forge ahead that even if I tried, I hardly think I could have held them in. He says, so we made our way south. Okay. When at long last, line 133, hove up a mountain gray with distance and so lofty and so steep, I never had seen the like on any day. Then we rejoiced. But soon we had to weep, for out of the unknown land there blew foul weather, and a whirlwind struck the forepart of the ship, and they sunk. It's Mount Purgatory. See, they couldn't be allowed to land, because if they had landed on the shore of Mount Purgatory, then Odysseus, Ulysses, and his men would have been allowed ultimately into heaven. Okay? And again, nobody else tells us this story other than Dante. Okay? Canto 27, Counselors of Fraud. We're still in Boge 8. Okay? So, Virgil releases Ulysses' spirit, we're told, line 2, presently dismissed by the sweet poet's license, it passed on. Okay? And they leave, and we see the spirit of Guido de Montefeltro speak. Dante's kind of aware of who this is. Yeah, I don't really want to talk about that. Go on to Canto 28. We go into Doge 9, Swords of Discord. We meet Muhammad. Okay. These are people who are split from head to toe. Well, not quite. As Sayers puts it, page 246, line 22. No cask stove in by cant or middle ever so gaped as one I saw there, from the chin down to the fart hole split as by a cleaver. So, from here to his anus, split in two. Okay? These are the sowers of discord. And we're told, 29. Then with his hands wrenched open his own breast, crying, see how I rend myself, what rack mangles Muhammad, that's Muhammad, weeping without rest, Ali, Muhammad's grandson, I think that's his grandson, nephew of Muhammad. Before me goes, his whole face slit by one great stroke upward from chin to crest. So Ali slit from here up. All these whom thou beholdest in the pit were sowers of scandal, sowers of schism abroad, while they yet lived, therefore they now go split. Okay? So they asked Dante, why are you there? Line 46. Excuse me, 44. Doubtless to delay going to thy pangs, self-judged and self-accused. And Virgil says, nope, he's not dead yet, nor brought here as a prey to torment by his guilt. My master said, but to gain full experience of the way he comes. Of the way. Well, what's the way? This is part of the, the allegorical interpretation. Sayers mentions in her introduction, hell is where, for the purpose of the allegorical interpretation of the poem. It's inside. These are all elements of our inner side. So to gain experience of the way, or excuse me, full experience of the way, what must the soul do to unite with God? It's got to acknowledge all of this. That's all part of the act of confession and repentance. You have to repent of it and be contrite, sincerely contrite, and turn away from it. Okay? So he talks about, that's why I'm leading him. Let's see. Let's go on. Canto 29, they'll go on to Page 10. This is the final level of the eighth circle. Okay. We're told, alluded to, that it's now Holy Saturday, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And that comes from the footnote to line 10. Already the moon is underneath our feet. All right. So they're in the pit of disease. These are the falsifiers. These are both falsifiers of things, counterfeit money, counterfeit coin, or persons, people who impersonate others. Okay. And we have the example in Canto 30 of Gyani Shiki, who pretended to be somebody else so that he could change a will. Okay. And then we have a famous coin counterfeiter referred to who falsified, we're told, line 73 and following, page 260. Ramina's there, the city where I learned to falsify the Baptist coin. Up yonder for the offense I was condemned and burned. The Baptist coin, the florin of Florence, which had on the face of it the image of John the Baptist, because John the Baptist was the patron saint of the city of Florence. Okay? And Dante kind of enjoys, bottom of page 261, he kind of enjoys this what do you want to call it? This argument, the sniping that goes back and forth between two of the people. And we're told on 262, Virgil upbraids him. Bottom of 161, 261. Virgil says, line 131, yes, feast thine eyes. Go on, a little more, and I shall quarrel with thee. And when I heard him use that angry tone to me, I turned to him so on fire with shame, it comes over me still, though all these years have flown. In other words, this is written, he's suggesting, long after 1300. And like a man who dreams a dreadful dream, and dreams he would it were a dream indeed, longing for that which is with eager aim, as though 'twere not, so I speechless to plead for pardon, pleaded all the while with him by my distress, and did not know I did. That is, without any words, Dante kind of pleaded for mercy and forgiveness from Virgil. Virgil, lest shame were to wash away a greater crime than thine has been, think no more of it, but another time. So don't think any more about what you've done here, but another time. Imagine I'm still standing at your side when you are in the presence of people wrangling thus. Why? It's vulgar to enjoy that kind of thing. He's telling Dante, you shouldn't take joy in this kind of argument. It's beneath you, okay? Canto 31, fraud complex. This is traitorous fraud. This is, when you deceive someone who has placed trust and faith and loyalty in you. So they get lowered down by Antaeus, one of the giants, down to the lowest pit of hell. In the lowest pit of hell, think of it like a bullseye. You got an outer ring, an inner ring, an inner ring. So the outer ring is, I'm going to skip all the stuff about the giants. So let's go on. The outer ring is Cainna, okay, named after Cain, killed his brother Abel. So this is reserved for those who betrayed their kindred. This is the outer ring of the lowest pit of hell. Okay. The next is going to be Antenora. These are those who betrayed their country. Okay. So outer ring, kinslayers, those who betrayed their families, then those who betrayed their countries, and then the innermost, those who betrayed their lords. All right. So when they get down onto the ice, Dante is told line 19. Take heed how thou dost go, for fear thy feet should trample as I pass on the heads of the weary brotherhood of woe. Be careful where you step so you don't step on somebody. Because this is a lake, but it's frozen. All right? And Dante sees various people. We're told, page 34, so wedged in eyes to the point at which appear the hues of shame, livid, and with their teeth chattering like storks, the dismal shades stood there. So some are standing, some are buried halfway, some are on their backs with just their faces up, some have their faces down. Okay? And Dante kicks one, line 76. Whether 'twas will, that is, whether I intended it, fate, chance, I cannot say, but threading through the heads, I struck my heel hard on a face that stood athwart my way, and voice cries out, what are you doing? Why'd you do that? Okay. And Dante speaks and says, who are you? And he says, line 88, nay, who art thou to go through Antenora kicking people's faces? Thou mightst be living. 'Twas so shrewd a blow. Because obviously if Dante were a shade, his foot wouldn't hurt. Dante says, living I am, do thou sing praises for that. If thou seek fame, I'll give thee it, writing thy name with other notable cases. And the guy says, nope, don't want you to remember me at all. Okay? So Dante bends down and grabs him by the scruff of the neck and says, oh, tell me thy name or have their hair stripped from thy scalp, shred by shred. And the guy says, nope, I'm not going to tell you anything. Okay? So they leave him alone and they go on, and Dante sees two other guys. And the one has his head almost all the way in the ice, and the other's mouth is on the back of the first guy's head. He's ripped the skull off and he's chewing at the brains. This is the third of those dyad kind of images. And we're told, 125 and following. I saw two frozen together in one hole, so that the one head capped the other head. And as starved and tear-bred, this tore the pall of the one beneath, chewing with ravenous jaw, where brain meets marrow, just beneath the skull. With no more furious zest did Tadeus gnaw the skip of Menalippus, than he ate the brain pan and the other tissues raw. O thou that in such bestial wise dost sate thy rage on him thou munchest, tell me why. On this condition, I said, that if thy hate seem justified, I undertake that I, knowing who you are, and knowing all his crime, will see thee righted in the world on high. Okay? If you have good cause, I'll try to explain, your good cause in the world up above. And so we meet Canto 33, These are Traitors to Country, Ugolino and Roger. And the one chewing on the head of the other lifts his mouth up, wipes his mouth on the hair of the one whose head he's eating, and says, line 13, I was Count Ugolin, and he Archbishop Roger. Hearken well wherefore I use him thus, this neighbor of mine. And he tells us the story of how he, Count Ugolino, died with his, the way Dante puts it, his 4 children in a tower where they were locked up by Archbishop Roger. Okay. He was betrayed by Roger. He put his trust and faith in Roger. Roger betrayed him. And this actually did happen. It wasn't his children, though. It was 2 children and 2 grandchildren that died. They were locked up. 8 days later, the tower was opened, and they were all dead. Well, 279, Dante just pulls out all the pathos stops, as it were. And one of the children cries out to his father, line 61, O Father, it will give us much less pain if thou wilt feed on us. Thy gift at birth was this, that said flesh, strip thou it off again. Because he's biting his hand, for misery, not because he's hungry. They think he's trying to eat himself. So he calms down, and that day they sit mute, and the next they sit mute, and the fourth day comes, and one of the children cries, "My father, why dost thou not help me?" and dies. And he says, "As thou dost see me here, I saw him die, and one by one the other three died too, from the fifth day to the sixth." He says, "I was blind already." Now, Sayers mentions in her notes, a lot of people think he's blind for some spiritual reason. She points out, no, it's because he's dying of hunger. When you go through hunger, you start, real hunger, not, oh, I'm hungry. You're dying of hunger, you start to lose, you may lose your sight, right? So he, explains why he's doing what he's doing, right? Then Dante meets Fra Alberigo, page 281. Dante's like, wait, how? You're dead already? And Alberigo says, nope, still alive up there, but my soul's down here. And he says, line 124, such privilege this Ptolemaea bears, that oft the soul falls down here ere it is before the day when Atropos compels it with her shears. Atropos, the third of the Greek fates, right? And if it will persuade thee, take away these glazing tears by which my face is green. No, when a soul is chosen to betray, as I did, straight it's ousted by a fiend. So when a living person betrays someone who has given all their trust to that person, he says, a fiend, a devil, comes and takes that soul, sends it to hell. And I think the implication is the fiend then takes the place of the soul in the living body. The soul drops down into the cistern pool, be like the shade wintering behind me here, still has a body on earth. Probable. And notice, by the way, Sayers notes, page 283, these traitors, these are the traitors to hospitality. They who denied the most primitive of human sanctities are now almost sealed off from humanity. They cannot even weep. They are dead to humanity before they die. That which seems to live in them on earth is only a devil in human form. The man in them is withdrawn out of reach into the cold damnation. And I wonder if that's what C.S. Lewis means in Paralandra, in that novel, when the character of Weston, after he calls, Satan essentially into him, he has a moment of lucidity and says, Ransom, help me, help me. They've pushed me down into the darkness. I wonder if that's what he's getting at. And then finally, Canto 34. They go through, so now we've gone through Diana, Antenora, and now we're in Judeca, named after Judas, okay? And Virgil says, behold, dis. What does Satan mean? Adversary. Dis means opposite, negation. It's the opposite and negation of everything that is good, okay? And we see Satan, 3 heads, 3 faces, one facing this direction, one facing this direction, one facing this direction. 6 wings. Why? Because he's a cherubim. 6 eyes, we're told. Scripturally, the cherubim have 6 eyes, 6 wings. In each mouth, he's chewing somebody. The mouth facing forward, he's got Judas. Okay? And in the mouths on either side of his head, he's got Brutus and Cassius. And Sayers points out and makes clear, he doesn't have Brutus and Cassius because they're quote unquote, anti-democratic. He has Brutus and Cassius because one of the images that Dante is utilizing throughout the entire thing is the image of the empire, okay? Because the empire, or empire is an image of God's rule, where God is the emperor, and then the various levels of administrative structure, let's say, of empire, are the levels of administrative structure of heaven. Michael, the chief of the archangels, the ranks of the angels, etc., all the way down to the lowest, level, so to speak. Okay. So Brutus and Cassius are there because what did they do? They went against empire, even though Julius Caesar wasn't an emperor. He was never crowned emperor. They are against empire per se. They want to stop him from becoming empire or emperor. Therefore, within the scheme of the story, they are anti-God. In fact, they're nearly as anti-God as Judas is. Okay. So we get a long description of Satan and what he looks like, and the goo and stuff dribbling down, and they have to come up to Satan, and Virgil has to hold on to Dante, and he starts climbing down. Satan's got a shaggy, hairy body, and when they get to the navel, Virgil says, hold on tight. Line 79, turned head to where his feet had been, and fell to hoisting himself up upon the air, so that I thought his mounting back to hell. So they get down to his navel. They've been like climbing down a ladder, and now Virgil has to turn upside down, so that now he's going to be climbing up towards his feet. Well, what have we just done? We've just gone through the center of the earth. So now gravity is working the other direction. It's still pulling towards the center of the earth, okay? But they have to work up. And they work up, and it takes hours, okay? And let's see here. Page 288. Dante asks, one moment, sir, line 100. When I had risen, before I pluck myself from the abyss, that is, before I leave hell proper and lighten my darkness, that is my intellectual darkness, help me understand, were the word in season. Kindly explain. Where'd the ice go? Which turned Satan upside down? Or in an hour thus whirled the sun from dusk to evening to dawning skies, because it was dark. And now they see sun's rising. And he says, no, you don't understand. So long as I descended, thou wast there. But when I turned at the navel, turned upside down, then was the point passed by toward which all weight bears down from everywhere. The other hemisphere, the northern hemisphere, doth o'er thee lie antipodal to that which land roofs in. See, they thought, within the story at least, all the land of the world is in the northern hemisphere, and all the southern hemisphere is water, except for Mount Purgatory. Okay? And under whose meridian came to die the man born sinless and who did no sin. That is Jerusalem. Jerusalem's the center of the northern hemisphere, okay, according to the geography. And this is not geography. This is not meant to be read as scientific geography. Dante does not mean us to read and understand this part of it is literally true, okay? It's literal for the story to work. You've got to accept this. In fact, for all of the story to work of the journey through hell, purgatory, heaven, you've got to cast aside whatever belief system you have and say, okay, for the purpose of this, I have to accept what Dante says, right? So he goes on and says, this side of the world from out high heaven he fell. So they're now in the southern hemisphere, and he's telling us Satan was thrown out from heaven, and he entered the world from the southern hemisphere. The land which here stood forth fled back dismayed. That is, the land that was here went all the way to the northern hemisphere, pulling the sea upon her like a veil, so it now covers that, and sought our hemisphere. With equal dread belike, that peak of earth which still is found this side rushed up. So Satan hit, think of an asteroid. The land fled, the sea came, Satan went down in, and poof, out came Mount Purgatory, right? So he talks about a small stream which trickles down the steep, hollowing its channel, where with gentle fall and devious course, its wandering waters creep. Line 133, by that hid way my guide and I withal, back to the lit world from the darkened dens toiled upward. The river they're following is going to become the river of Lethe, which he will have to cross over from Purgatory. I think that's right. Hold on. Line 130. Yeah, will become Lethe, which he will have to cross over from Purgatory into Paradise. And going through the river of Lethe, memories are wiped. But it's not all memories, it's all evil memories. It's all memory of sin. So that when one enters heaven, one is perfected. Okay? The sin is all wiped away through the ascent of Purgatory, right? He first, I following, line 136, till my straining sense glimpsed the bright burden of the heavenly cars, the stars in heaven, through a round hole. By this we climbed, and thence came forth to look once more upon the stars. It's now Easter morning, approximately 5 a.m., according to the counting of the stars and such. Okay, we will stop there. Next time will be Purgatory.